The dust devil that swept through Redemption Creek that scorching July morning carried more than sand and tumbleweeds. It brought a stranger whose presence would unravel the carefully woven lies that held the town together. Martha Whitmore stood behind the cracked window of her boarding house, watching the lone rider emerge from the heat shimmer like a ghost materializing from the desert itself. Her weathered hands clutched the faded curtains, knuckles white as bleached bone. 3 years had passed since her husband's death. 3 years of invisibility in a town that had forgotten she existed beyond the meals she served and the rooms she cleaned. The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to violence. His duster coat, the color of dried blood, hung loose over a frame that spoke of hard living and harder choices. But it was his eyes that made Martha's breath catch. Pale blue, like winter ice, scanning the street with the methodical precision of a predator. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat as he approached her porch. His voice carried the weight of distant thunder. "Name's Cole Brennan. Heard you might have a room." Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd heard that name whispered in saloons, carried on the wind from distant territories. Cole Brennan, the man who'd tracked down the Dalton gang, who'd faced 3 men in Tombstone and walked away while they fed the desert sand. $2 a night, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Meals included. As she led him inside, Martha felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of being truly seen. His eyes lingered on her face, not with the dismissive glance most men gave widows past their prime, but with genuine attention, as if he were memorizing every line etched by sorrow and solitude. "You've got kind eyes, Mrs. Whitmore." Martha Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore. "In my experience, kind eyes are rarer than gold in these parts." That evening, as Martha served him supper in the empty dining room, Cole spoke of distant places and forgotten dreams. His words painted pictures of cities beyond the desert, of oceans that stretched to infinity, of a world where a woman's worth wasn't measured by her husband's shadow. "Nobody ever really notices me," Martha found herself saying, the words escaping, before she could stop them. "I'm just here, like the furniture." Cole set down his fork, those ice-blue eyes fixing on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Then they're all blind fools, Mrs. Whitmore. A woman like you deserves to be seen." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like skeletal fingers. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street, a tall man with copper skin and obsidian eyes, adorned with silver and turquoise that caught the lamplight. Chief running bear of the Mescalero Apache had been tracking Cole Brennan for 3 moons, following a trail of blood and broken promises that led back to a massacre in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The Apache chief's hand moved to the leather pouch at his side, fingers tracing the outline of an ornate silver necklace, a piece that had belonged to his daughter before the soldiers came, before the fire and screaming, before Cole Brennan had ridden away with blood on his hands and lies on his lips. As Martha cleared the dishes, her fingers accidentally brushed Cole's hand. The contact sent electricity through her veins, awakening something she'd thought buried with her husband. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she wasn't invisible, where someone like Cole Brennan might see her as more than just another lonely widow in a forgotten town. But in the shadows beyond her window, death was already sharpening its blade, and the past was riding hard to collect its due. The necklace in Running Bear's pouch seemed to pulse with its own dark heartbeat, waiting for the moment when justice would finally be served, and Martha Whitmore would discover that sometimes being noticed comes with a price too terrible to pay. The desert wind howled its ancient warning, but inside the boarding house, 2 lonely souls continued their dance of words and glances, unaware that their fragile connection was about to be tested by forces as old and unforgiving as the land itself. The second night brought revelations that would shatter Martha's carefully constructed world like glass against stone. She found Cole, on the boarding house porch, silhouetted against the star-drunk sky, a half-empty whiskey bottle catching moonlight beside his chair. The desert air carried the scent of sage and something else, something that spoke of violence and regret. Couldn't sleep either? Martha asked, settling into the chair beside him. She'd abandoned her usual reserve, drawn by the magnetic pull of his presence and the dangerous thrill of feeling alive again. Cole's laugh held no humor. Sleep's a luxury for men with clean consciences, Mrs. Whitmore. I gave up that particular comfort years ago. What haunts you, Mr. Brennan? He turned, those ice-blue eyes on her, and she saw something fracture in their depths, the ghosts of choices that seemed right at the time, the faces of people who trusted me when they shouldn't have. Martha reached out, her fingers finding his hand in the darkness. His skin was warm, calloused from years of hard living, and she felt him tense at her touch before slowly relaxing. We all carry ghosts, she whispered. Mine just happened to be quieter than most. Tell me about your husband. The question hung between them like smoke. Martha had spoken of Thomas to no one, since his funeral, had locked those memories away in the deepest chambers of her heart. He was safe, she said finally. Predictable. He married me because his mother told him it was time, and I married him because it was expected. We lived parallel lives in the same house for 15 years, never really touching, never really seeing each other. And when he died, I realized I'd been invisible long before he was gone. The town just made it official. Cole lifted their joined hands, studying her fingers in the pale light. You deserve better than invisible, Martha. The use of her first name sent warmth flooding through her chest. When had anyone last spoken her name with such tenderness? What about you? She asked. What brought you to Redemption Creek? Cole's expression darkened. Running from something that won't stay buried. 3 years ago, I was part of a cavalry unit sent to relocate an Apache band. We were told they were hostile, that they'd been raiding settlements. Martha felt his hand tremble slightly in hers. The intelligence was wrong. They were peaceful. Families, children, elders. But by the time we realized the truth, his voice cracked. I tried to stop it, Martha. God help me, I tried. But I was just one man against orders, against fear, against the machinery of war. What happened? Massacre. That's the only word for it. And when it was over, when the smoke cleared and the screaming stopped, I took something, a necklace that belonged to the chief's daughter. I told myself I was preserving it, honoring her memory. But I was just a thief stealing from the dead. Martha's blood chilled. Where is it now? Hidden. Safe. I've been carrying the guilt of it ever since, along with the knowledge that Chief Running Bear has been hunting me. He has every right to want my blood. As if summoned by his name, a shadow detached itself from the darkness beyond the porch. Chief Running Bear stepped into the moonlight, his presence as silent and inevitable as death itself. Silver ornaments gleamed against his dark clothing, and his obsidian eyes held the weight of 3 years' worth of grief and rage. Cole Brennan, the Apache chief said, his voice carrying the authority of wind through canyon walls. The man who speaks of honor, while wearing the blood of innocence. Martha gasped, instinctively moving closer to Cole, who had gone rigid as carved stone. Running Bear. Cole's voice was steady, resigned. I've been expecting you. Have you? The chief's smile was sharp as a blade. Then you know why I have come. The necklace. My daughter's necklace. The last gift I gave her before your soldiers murdered her in her sleep. Running Bear's hand moved to a leather pouch at his side. But I have not come only for silver and turquoise, white man. I have come for justice. Martha found her voice. Please, there must be another way. Silence. Woman. Running Bear's gaze flicked to her, and she saw something unexpected there. Not cruelty, but a deep, abiding sadness. This is between warriors. She's not part of this, Cole said, standing slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. Is she not? Running Bear tilted his head. You have made her part of it by allowing her to care for you, by making her believe in the lie of your redemption. The truth of those words hit Martha like a physical blow. She had allowed herself to hope, to dream of a future beyond the suffocating confines of her invisible life. But hope, she was learning, was a luxury as dangerous as it was precious. "What do you want?" Cole asked. Running Bear reached into his pouch and withdrew an ornate silver necklace, its turquoise stones seeming to glow with their own inner light. "I want you to understand loss, Cole Brennan. I want you to know what it means to have something precious torn away." The chief's eyes moved to Martha, and she felt the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders like a shroud. "Choose. Running," Bear said simply. "Your life or hers." The silence that followed Running Bear's ultimatum stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Martha felt the world tilt on its axis, her newfound sense of being seen transforming into something far more dangerous being chosen. "No," Cole said, his voice cutting through the desert night like a blade. "I won't let you use her to settle our debt." Running Bear's obsidian eyes never left Martha's face. "You misunderstand, white man. This is not about using her. This is about teaching you the true cost of taking what is precious from another." Martha stepped forward, surprising herself with her own courage. "I can speak for myself." Her voice, usually so quiet it barely disturbed the air, now carried a strength she didn't know she possessed. "What exactly are you asking of me?" The Apache chief studied her with newfound respect. "You have lived as a ghost in this town, invisible and forgotten. I offer you a choice. Remain in the shadows or step into the light and face the consequences of being truly seen." From his pouch, Running Bear withdrew the silver necklace, its turquoise stones catching the moonlight like captured stars. The craftsmanship was exquisite, delicate silverwork intertwined with stones the color of summer sky, each piece telling a story of love and loss. "This belonged to my daughter Ayana. She was 17 when your soldiers came, Cole Brennan. 17 and dreaming of her wedding day." His voice carried the weight of mountains. "She died wearing this necklace and you took it from her body like a common grave robber." Cole's face had gone ashen. I thought I was preserving it, honoring her memory. By hiding it away, by carrying it like a trophy?" Running Bear's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "You honored nothing but your own guilt." Martha found herself drawn to the necklace, its beauty both mesmerizing and terrible. "What do you want me to do?" "Wear it," Running Bear said simply. "Accept the burden of its history, the weight of its sorrow. Become the keeper of my daughter's memory, and in doing so, teach this man what it truly means to lose something irreplaceable." "And if I refuse, then Cole Brennan dies tonight, and you return to your invisible life, having learned that even the briefest taste of being seen comes with a price." Martha's mind raced. 3 days ago she had been nothing, a shadow moving through a world that barely acknowledged her existence. Now she stood at the center of a storm that had been brewing for 3 years, holding the power to save or damn the first man who had truly seen her. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "About being invisible, about being forgotten." She looked directly at Running Bear. "It teaches you to watch, to listen, to see things others miss." The Wam chief's eyebrows rose slightly. "I've seen you, Chief Running Bear. Every night for the past week, watching from the shadows. I've seen the way you touch that pouch, the way your shoulders carry grief like stones. I've seen a father's love turned to vengeance, and I understand it, because I know what it means to lose everything that matters." Cole stared at her in amazement. "Martha, I also know," she continued, "that killing Cole won't bring your daughter back. It won't ease the pain or fill the emptiness. It will only add another ghost to the collection we all carry." Running Bear's expression remained impassive, but Martha caught a flicker of something, surprise perhaps, or recognition. "You speak of things you do not understand, white woman, don't I?" Martha stepped closer, close enough to see the silver threads in the chief's dark hair, the lines etched by sorrow around his eyes. "I understand that you've been hunting Cole not just for justice, but because the hunt gives your grief purpose. I understand because I've been doing the same thing. Hunting invisibility, hunting numbness, hunting anything that would let me avoid facing the truth. Which is that sometimes the dead are easier to love than the living. That sometimes vengeance is simpler than forgiveness. That sometimes we choose to remain ghosts because being alive hurts too much." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Running Bear's hand tightened on the necklace, and for a moment Martha saw not a fearsome Apache chief, but a broken father clinging to the last tangible piece of his child. "You would wear my daughter's necklace?" he asked quietly. "I would honor it," Martha replied. "I would carry her memory not as a burden, but as a gift. I would make sure she is remembered, not just for how she died, but for how she lived." Cole moved to protest, but Martha silenced him with a look. "And in return," she continued, "you would let Cole live with his guilt, which I suspect is a far crueler punishment than death. You would let him spend his remaining years trying to earn a forgiveness that may never come." Running Bear was quiet, for a long moment studying the necklace in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft as desert wind. "My daughter's name was Ayana. It means eternal blossom. She loved to sing, and she made jewelry almost as beautiful as this piece." He looked up at Martha. "If you wear this, you carry not just silver and stone, but the responsibility of keeping her spirit alive in a world that would forget her." Martha extended her hand. "Then let me help her bloom eternal." As Running Bear placed the necklace in her palm, Martha felt its weight, not just the physical silver and turquoise, but the accumulated grief, love, and hope of a father's heart. The stones seemed to pulse with their own warmth, and for a moment she could almost hear the echo of a young woman's laughter carried on the desert wind. But as the necklace settled around her throat, Martha realized that being truly seen came with consequences she was only beginning to understand. Dawn broke over Redemption Creek like a wound bleeding light across the desert sky. Martha stood before her cracked mirror, the silver necklace resting against her throat like a collar of stars and sorrow. The turquoise stones seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, and she could swear she heard whispers in a language she didn't understand. Ayana's voice, perhaps, carried on winds that bridged the gap between the living and the dead. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful night on the porch. 3 weeks since she had chosen to step from the shadows into a light that burned as much as it illuminated. The town of Redemption Creek had indeed begun to notice Martha Whitmore, but not in the way she had dreamed during those lonely years of invisibility. "Witch," they whispered when she passed. "Apache lover, cursed woman." The necklace had marked her as surely as a brand. Where once she had been invisible, now she was notorious. The white woman who wore dead Indian jewelry, who had somehow bewitched both a notorious gunfighter and an Apache chief. The boarding house had emptied of guests, the dining room echoed with silence, and the bank had begun making inquiries about her mortgage payments. But Martha found she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she was truly alive. Cole had stayed, despite Running Bear's departure into the desert that night. He'd tried to convince her to remove the necklace, to return to her safe invisibility, but Martha had refused. She understood now that some transformations were irreversible, that once you stepped into the light, the shadows could never fully reclaim you. "You're destroying yourself for a dead girl's memory," Cole had argued just that morning, his ice-blue eyes filled with anguish. "No," Martha had replied, her fingers tracing the silver work at her throat. "I'm finally living for something greater than my own fear." Now, as she prepared breakfast for her last remaining boarder, a traveling preacher who seemed fascinated by what he called her spiritual awakening, Martha heard the sound of approaching horses. Through the window, she saw a sight that made her blood freeze, a cavalry patrol, led by a hard-faced colonel whose uniform bore the dust of long travel. Cole appeared at her side, his hand instinctively moving to his gun. "Colonel Morrison," he said grimly, "my former commanding officer." The soldiers dismounted with military precision, their boots striking the porch boards like hammer blows. Colonel Morrison entered without invitation, his pale eyes scanning the room before settling on the necklace at Martha's throat. Well, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to absolute obedience. "If it isn't the infamous Mrs. Whitmore, and wearing Apache jewelry, I see. How appropriate." "Colonel," Cole stepped forward, placing himself between Martha and the officer. "What brings you to Redemption Creek?" "You do, Brennan. You and your newfound conscience." Morrison's smile was sharp as a blade. "Did you really think you could disappear into the desert and avoid the consequences of your desertion?" "I didn't desert. I resigned my commission. After stealing government property and consorting with the enemy." Morrison's gaze flicked to Martha. "Speaking of consorting with the enemy, I understand you've been entertaining Apache visitors, Mrs. Whitmore." Martha lifted her chin, feeling Ayana's spirit flowing through her like liquid courage. Chief Running Bear came in peace. We settled our differences like civilized people. Civilized? Morrison laughed. Madam, there is nothing civilized about savages. And there is certainly nothing civilized about a white woman wearing the trinkets of dead heathens. The words hit Martha like physical blows, but she stood her ground. This necklace represents a young woman's life, Colonel. A life that was taken unjustly. That necklace, Morrison said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is evidence of theft from a military operation. And you, Mrs. Whitmore, are harboring a deserter and stolen property. Cole's hand moved to his gun, but Martha placed her fingers on his wrist, stopping him. She had learned something in these past weeks, that true strength came not from violence, but from the willingness to stand in the light despite the cost. Then arrest me, she said simply. Morrison blinked, clearly not expecting such directness. I beg your pardon? You heard me. If wearing this necklace makes me a criminal, if honoring a dead girl's memory makes me a savage, then arrest me. But know this, I will not remove it. I will not return to being invisible. I will not pretend that Ayanna never existed just to make your conscience more comfortable. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the mantel clock and the whisper of wind through the eaves. Morrison's face had gone red with anger, but Martha saw something else there. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. You don't understand the forces you're playing with, woman, he said finally. Don't I? Martha stepped forward, the necklace catching the morning light. I understand that 3 years ago you ordered the massacre of innocent people. I understand that you've been hunting Cole not because he deserted, but because he knows the truth about what happened that day. And I understand that you're afraid that the truth will come out, afraid that your career will be ruined, afraid that history will remember you not as a hero, but as a butcher. Morrison's hand moved to his sidearm, but before he could draw, the sound of approaching horses filled the air once again. Through the window, Martha saw a sight that made her heart soar. Running Bear, accompanied by a dozen Apache warriors, their horses arranged in a perfect line across the street. The Apache chief dismounted and walked to the porch with the fluid grace of a man who owned the very ground beneath his feet. His obsidian eyes took in the scene, the soldiers, the colonel's hand on his weapon, Martha standing defiant with his daughter's necklace gleaming at her throat. Colonel Morrison, Running Bear said, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. We meet again? Morrison's face had gone pale. Chief, I thought you were, that is, we heard, that I was dead? That your lies had finally silenced the last witness to your crimes? Running Bear smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I am very much alive, Colonel, and I have brought friends. The Apache warriors remained mounted but ready, their presence transforming the morning air into something electric and dangerous. What do you want? Morrison demanded. Justice, Running Bear replied simply. The same thing Mrs. Whitmore wants, the same thing my daughter's spirit demands. Martha felt the necklace grow warm against her skin, and for a moment she could swear she saw a young Apache woman standing beside her, Ayanna, eternal blossom, finally free to bloom in the light of truth. You have a choice, Colonel, Martha said, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. You can try to arrest us, try to silence the truth with violence, or you can face what you've done, accept responsibility for your actions, and let the healing begin. Morrison looked around the room, at Cole's steady gaze, at Running Bear's implacable presence, at Martha standing tall with the weight of justice around her throat. His hand slowly moved away from his weapon. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, Martha replied, touching the necklace gently. It is. As the colonel and his men rode away in defeat, Martha felt something she had never experienced before, the profound satisfaction of being not just seen, but heard, respected, and feared by those who would silence truth. Cole took her hand, his ice-blue eyes filled with wonder. You realize there's no going back now? You'll never be invisible again. Martha smiled, feeling Ayanna's spirit settle around her like a blessing. Good, she said. I was never meant to be a shadow. Running Bear approached, his weathered face softening as he looked at the necklace. My daughter would have liked you, Martha Whitmore. You have given her voice when she had none, presence when she was forgotten. She gave me something too, Martha replied. She taught me that being seen isn't about being noticed, it's about having the courage to stand in the light no matter how much it burns. As the sun climbed higher over Redemption Creek, Martha Whitmore stood on her porch, no longer invisible, no longer forgotten, no longer afraid. The necklace at her throat caught the light like captured stars, and somewhere in the desert wind, she could hear the sound of eternal blossoms finally free to bloom. The price of being seen, she had learned, was everything she thought she wanted. But the reward was everything she never knew she needed: purpose, courage, and the unshakable knowledge that some truths are worth any cost. In the end, Martha Whitmore had found her voice not in the shadows where she had hidden, but in the blazing light of justice, wearing the memory of a murdered girl like armor against a world that would prefer its ghosts to remain silent. And in that light, she was finally, truly, magnificently seen.